Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Katrina and this is So I've been working hard at getting my NetGalley score up. No, it's still 64%, so but I am working to get it up to 80%. So the first book that I read in this last round of ARCs, Kingdom of Secrets, was a delightful read. While a lot of middle grade is about magical kids, this book was simply about a brave group fighting against a tyrannical kingdom. The land has been separated into two countries, and the walled country of Orin is where the king is and where rich people are, and outside those walls it's the slums. And Prissy and Abby both live. Prissy and Abby are our main characters, and they both live on the outside of the walls. Prissy, however, is doing pretty well. Her father is a hot air balloon maker and repairer, and one day when Prissy is alone, Prismina is her name, but Prissy is what she's called throughout the story, this little black girl with wild hair and crazy clothes comes up to her and starts to annoy the mess out of her, and she steals a silk scarf. That's the only thing she has left from her mother, who has died. She steals the silk scarf from her and says, "I'll give it back to you if you help me do this thing." And the thing that it is to send something over the wall in one of her father's hot air balloons. This is obviously treasonous, and it gets the kids into trouble. And so Prissy ends up going on, actually Prissy's father gets arrested for it, and Prissy ends up going on this adventure with these underground kids to fight the tyrannical kingdom as well as try to get her father back. Really loved how three-dimensional all the kids were in this story. I loved that they were, they weren't stock characters, and a lot of times people go overboard with people of color or disabled kids and make them perfect, but Abby, the little black girl, was annoying and pushy and disrespectful, and she ended up being, friends with Prismina towards the end of the book, but she was a hardened kid from the streets, and it took a while for her to. She lied. She wasn't a perfect kid, and I appreciated that. And all of the kids were flawed. Sometimes they were brave, sometimes they were cowards, sometimes they were annoying, sometimes they were really good to each other. Sometimes they would take care of each other. They took care of, there was a little bitty one with them, and they would sometimes share their food with him and things like that. So I liked that they were that way, and and sometimes it could be really sanctimonious, especially Prissy. She also liked that there was a sense of mystery and surprise that you got with a middle grade book that you don't normally get. I liked also that these girls used imagination and science to solve their problems, that it wasn't just magic, there wasn't a chosen one trope or anything like that. They all had to work together. They were brave, they were adventurous, thought for themselves, they were loyal, and they cared for each other. And so I gave this 4 stars because of that. And there was something just kind of a little bit off about the story, and I couldn't put my finger on what it was, and I still can't. It felt, it didn't flow as perfectly as I thought it should, or as some other books do. I don't know if this is this author's first story. She's the author of 3 books, and they are very, very young books. So I think this is the first like full-on, so it feels like that. It feels a little unrefined because it had so much else going for it. The natural diversity and all the good lessons, and like I said, I liked that they were imaginative and they worked together to figure out how to solve their problems. That pushed it from a 3.5 because I was kind of teetering there, like, do I give it a 3, 3.5, and that tipped it over to a 4 for me. And this book has already come out. It came out August 25th. The next book I reviewed was I Am Not Who You Think I Am by Eric Rickstad. And this was a audiobook, which was awesome. That's my preferred way of reading, and I was able to get through it really fast. It's a mystery. the basics of this story is that this little boy at 8 years old, Waylon Maynard, he walks in on his dad killing himself with the shotgun, and he's there first, so he sees this little piece of paper that says, "I am not who you think I am." And so he takes that paper for some reason, he doesn't know why, and he keeps it. 8 years later, when he's 16, he starts to have different memories. He becomes more certain that the note means something, and it's very twisty and addictive, and it shows you how obsession could cause you to lose yourself and lose sight of what good you do have around you. The story about, like, after that laconic summary kind of kid riding their bike, Stranger Things, Steven Spielberg kind of, Stephen King kind of little kid thing going on, the story becomes really propulsive and it moves really fast, and I couldn't stop listening after that point. So one thing that did kind of hold back my enjoyment of this story 100% was that there was a lot of trauma and just terrible things, mundane and over the top, happening to a child, and I don't enjoy that. Of course, these things are valuable for books, for important books, or even for a book like this. I'm not saying it shouldn't happen. I'm just saying, for me personally, I'm all for seeing rich people suffer. I'm all for the drama of some suburban mommy fights, or murderous suburban mommies, or I don't know, some witch in some little town who has to solve a mystery. But these kids just suffered and suffered and suffered, and it was wrapped up in what would be a really juicy mystery and this confusing, twisty, awesome end that actually had a tinge of sadness, because once you realize what this boy does in the pursuit of finding out about his father, it ends up his obsession and the lengths that he goes to find the truth, it all ends up kind of sad. That's a good mark on Eric Rickstad, because he really made me care for Waylon. Now, the narrator, Steven Weber, did an okay job as a narrator, but he didn't have the range to make Waylon sound like a little kid when he was a little kid, and then even sound like a young boy when he was a teen. I don't know how old Steven Weber is, but he sounds old. Like, he sounds like a 50-year-old, like a gruff 50-year-old. And he didn't have the range in his voice to pitch it higher or lower depending on who he was talking about. So that would make me forget sometimes, like, why is this child doing this? And you would forget, wait a minute, he's 16. Of course he would be doing this stupid thing. Of course he would get himself in trouble. Of course he would run headfirst into this situation without thinking. Sometimes that would keep the story from being completely immersive and took a little bit of the enjoyment away. So I gave this 4 stars, and this book comes out October 5th. The next book that I read was The Death of Jane Lawrence by Caitlin Starling. I was very excited about this book. Let me read the description for you instead of just doing my own synopsis of it, because I think that whoever did the copy for the book description overpromised. And if I ever wrote a book and somebody did this, I'd be like, can you please take that out, because you're gonna have people thinking too much of my book and you setting me up. So practical, unassuming Jane Shoringfield has done the calculations and decided that the most secure path forward is this: a husband in a marriage of convenience who allow her to remain independent and occupied with meaningful work. Her first choice, the dashing but reclusive Dr. Augustine Lawrence, agrees to her proposal with only one condition: that she must never visit Lindridge Hall, his crumbling family manor outside of town. Yet, on their wedding night, an accident strands her at his door in a pitch-black rainstorm, and she finds him changed. Gone is the bold, courageous surgeon, and in his place is a terrified, paranoid man, one who cannot tell reality from nightmare, and fears Jane is an apparition come to haunt him. By morning, Augustine is himself again, but Jane knows something is deeply wrong at Linbridge Hall, and with the man she so hastily bound her safety to. Set in a dark mirror version of post-war England, Starling crafts a new kind of gothic horror from the bones of the beloved canon. This Crimson Peak-inspired story assembles then upends every expectation set in place by Shirley Jackson and Rebecca, and will leave readers shaken, desperate to begin again as soon as they are finished. So see what I'm saying? They overpromised to a irresponsible degree. First of all, Jane was pretty interesting. The same situation where back in, like with Narnia, where the kids were sent to the countryside to their uncle's house because of the bombings that were going on in London. This is the same thing. This place is called Great Beltane, something like that. And so the same thing happened with her, and her parents died while she was living with this other family who loved her and took care of her, but it was time for them to retire and move somewhere else. And rather than move with them, she wanted to go ahead and get married. But she wanted to have a marriage, like the description said, where she could continue doing her mathematic work and accounting. She loved numbers, and it talked a lot about how she found comfort in how numbers were unchanging and things like that. And so she made a list of the eligible bachelors in town and went to her number one and proposed to him. And he at first was saying, you know, no. But it became clear that it wasn't because he wasn't attracted to her, but because of this mysterious thing going on in his life. So you do get pulled in by this mystery. And then it becomes quite sweet for a while, because while they decide, okay, we're gonna do this, but you have to not ever come to the manor, Augustine Lawrence. So the place that he has in town is his surgery, and then his office downstairs, and then upstairs he has an apartment and like a library and things like that. And so he wants her to stay there, and he'll come every day, and he will you know, work with her, and he'll hang out with her and stuff like that. He always has to go back to the crumbling mansion. Then he'll come back the next day. And first she said okay, but then the day of their wedding, she happened to end up, like, the servants didn't get that memo, and so they end up going there. They end up on the road to the manor, and a rainstorm hits and washes out the roads, and she ends up having to stay over, and weird things start going on from there. And you're trying to figure out, like, at first, the first, I don't know, 25% or so, first of all, they find out that there's real passion and love between them. And so I thought that was really lovely. It was really lovely to abide in that that kind of Victorian kind of love, where they would try to stay away from each other, and like the smallest little look, or the slightest rub of the hand and things like that, and then finally the first kiss would just be over the top. And so that was really nice. And then the mystery of what was going on with his house and with him and all of that was really engaging at first. But by the like 50% mark and on, it became her obsession and trying to figure out what was going on and trying to figure out how to solve the matter became extremely repetitious. Just the same thought process over and over and over again. And I assume, you know, like that would be what it would be like if you were in some situation like this and you felt like you needed to, you weren't quite sure because you're like, am I crazy that this is going on? Okay, I'm not crazy. This is what's going on. I need to do this, and I'm going to try to do this. But it goes on and on and on and on, and it just takes away all the enjoyment, because it's just repeats. The end ended up being a jumbled mess, and the description said that you'll want to, you know, immediately start reading the story over again. And while it was a jumbled mess and I ended up confused and disappointed, I did not want to start reading again, and I was just kind of upset that such a cool premise was squandered. And so I only gave it 2 stars. And this book comes out on the 5th of October as well. Now, the last book I finished from this list is called The Violin Conspiracy by Brendan Slocum. And it's about this young boy who loves violin. He loves playing it. You know, as a young black man, he doesn't have access to popular, famous teachers. He doesn't have a good fiddle, have a good violin. It is passed down from his great grandfather, and it's old and broken, but he does his best, and he plays the music. He loves it. His grandmother gives the violin to him and asks him she says it's his, and she asks him all the time to play for her and things like that. And he still rises in the ranks of these competitions and things like that. He's frustrated a lot because he thinks that he is not seen as a good violinist just because he's a good violinist, but because he's a oddity, the only black kid a lot of times. People say that right out a lot of times to him. And then through a series of events, it comes to light that he has a priceless Stradivarius, and the violin is restored. And when they take it to this person in New York to appraise it, it is then appraised at $10.1 million. And, you know, and so before he leaves there, he has to insure it and everything like that. And, you know, that's a mind altering kind of thing he has to deal with. And then he goes on to, to a competition in New York, and the Stradivarius is lost. And so it becomes big news. He starts a crowdfunding thing to get it back. There is a ransom note for it. There's multiple parts to the story. You have him having to deal with racism and lots of doubts that sometimes he will succumb to. We have this beautiful story of him just giving over to the music, and that was some of the strongest stuff, where the author would describe how he would communicate with the audience through the music, or how the notes would fly out of the violin and things like that. And I thought, wow, this is an amazing way to describe music. And then at the end, the author's note, you know, talked about how the guy is a violinist. So I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense now, that he was able to make music come alive that way. And then there was the mystery of who stole his violin. Then you had this competition. He wins or loses, deals with some racism, practice, goes to a competition, and it was kind of, you know, rote instead of a real story. And then the story picks back up and tells more of a story when the mystery of the Stradivarius getting lost is intertwined with the fact that he has signed up for this extraordinary concert that is a worldwide event in Russia. And he joined it because he had the confidence of having the Stradivarius, and now he's got this whole different violin that he has to try to get used to. People say to him, and he also feels like, you know, what if I was just special because I had a special violin? We learn about how hard he has to work, how much work and like physical labor and mental labor and all of that goes into the practice of being a musician. About 90% through the book, I figured out who it was, or I thought I knew who it was, and I was right. So that was fun. I think the plot was the strongest aspects of the book. describing Ray's musical world, how he had to practice, what he had to overcome, the doubts, the triumphs through playing the violin was very well described. I think that the author was best when he was describing the rapturous feelings that Ray had while playing the music. And I think the weakest point to the story was the characterization of Ray and the surrounding characters. We got a little bit more of Ray because we were in his mind, we were dealing with his mental health and how hard he had to work, but it still was, I still felt like I didn't quite know him. And it was even worse. Everybody else was kind of one note. People who supported him were just supportive people. The people like his mom, she was just a hood rat, you know. But I dropped a star from it because there was an entire plot point that was dropped. And maybe I missed it. I don't think I did because it was at the point where I was paying the most attention, and it just was completely dropped. There was no resolution to that point. But all in all, this was a really good story. It got much better as the story went on, and so I gave this one 3 stars, and it comes out February 2022. Are you doing NetGalley? Are you doing Edelweiss or any other type of ARC? Do you feel pressure? Like, I don't feel real pressure. The pressure is that I want to get the 80% because I want to have the option to get good books. I wanted White Smoke, and it would have been nice to get it and realize I don't like it too much. Instead, I bought it and didn't like it too much. So do you think that the free books are worth the review process that you have to do? Because, you know, you read a book and you have the choice whether or not you just want to put a star rating on Goodreads or not. And so is the review process too much of a hassle for you? Let me know down in the comments, and let me know what you thought about these books. Are you interested in picking any of these up?